All right, recording has started, and this is the July 1st. Happy July, Crossplane community meeting. I don't know where June went, but it's gone now. So folks are adding themselves to the attendees list here. Appreciate that. If you want your name on there, feel free to go ahead and drop it on there, and we will, maybe Dan can help as well too, accepting all these additions here. Biggest news to go over here is that we just released version 1.3 that came out. I thought it was yesterday, but it was actually two days ago on Tuesday. So right on schedule that we had planned on the 29th. You can see the release notes here in the link that is in the agenda document. So there are a couple of things to note in here in the release notes. One thing that I'm still quite pleased with is that upgrading is very smooth and very easy. There's not really like a lot of manual steps or any sort of migrations or things like that. So Helm upgrade in all cases there is good enough to get you from 1.2 to 1.3. We do have an upgrading guide there for more details or things to note, but I really do appreciate our attention to compatibility and semantic versioning and making sure that the process for each version is still pretty smooth. Then the biggest feature that we had talked about and we're definitely very happy to have in here was the whole ability to patch from multiple sources feature. So we ended up calling it the combine from composite and combine to composites the abilities in patching. But it's a really nice feature that was quite in demand for the ability to take multiple sources out of a composite object and then aggregate them into a single output that goes to your resources that are composing that object. So there is some documentation that was added for it. You'll be able to see the link, and it's definitely a feature that it was in high demand. So I'm glad it's officially released as of Tuesday. So hopefully folks will enjoy that there. Let's see what else to mention here. Yeah, I think the beta package and API extensions groups of API groups of the package.crossplane.io. They are now marked as deprecated. And Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's because we want folks to be using V1, right? We're moving towards V1, and that's the supported API group. So beta is deprecated, and we'll be dropping that in the next release or two.
Yeah, and this has been the case for a while, but we never formally marked them as deprecated, which means that we couldn't remove them. So now this starts the clock on three releases to which they can be removed.
Right, perfect. Yep, I'm glad we took those steps then. And then a number of bugs as well too around package manager and dependencies, and some like other fixes as well too. So a lot of people made contributions into the release there, and it was really nice to get that out and keep with the cadence that we have as well too. So every 2 months we've got a fresh release going out and keeping things up to date and features flowing through. So this is great, and congratulations to the whole community for getting another successful release out there. Yep, so release notes are available here in the agenda doc. Feel free to peruse as you wish later on as well too. So then that brings us to the next release in the cycle here is our 1.4. We have barely gotten started on that one since we just released 1.3 2 days ago. But you can always keep up to date with the release schedule on the main Crossplane repo. We have a table there for what the release cadence is when they end of life, all that sort of stuff. So now that 1.3 is out the door, then 1.4 will be the next release that's coming out, and that is end of August is when we will be planning to release that. We hit it exactly for the last couple of releases, so the cadence is getting fairly regular and fairly consistent. So you should be able to expect that 1.4 release pretty much on that day. All right, so now we can kind of talk about what we want to focus on in 1.4. And so I'm seeing some additions to the doc here, which is fantastic, where we're getting some feedback and getting some guidance on what people want to see. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the 1.4 project board so we can kind of get a glimpse of the current status of things Muafik is he is out for about a month or so, and he will not have any online access either for during that time while he's offline. But he's got a number of things in progress that are carrying over from 1.3 to 1.4, including the cross-resource references design, and then taking that beyond to an implementation as well too. We talked a little bit about that in the last community meeting, but I think that's still something we want to keep pushing for in 1.4 because I think it solves a lot of interesting problems and makes the story around the Crossplane model all the more strong as well too. So I definitely think that's something we should continue on with 1.4. Dan, can you give me a quick update or refresher on the integration testing stuff? Because I know Rahul with the LFX mentorship program got some of the integration testing in place for like core composition engine sort of stuff. What's the big things left on there we want to keep investing on in your mind?
Well, a lot of benefit has come from the work that Nick has done on conformance testing, and I imagine that we're going to continue to build that out. It might be worth honestly closing that issue and opening more specific ones, which I can definitely look into. Obviously, packages and composition tests are the main parts of core Crossplane that we want implemented. A big thing to me in terms of something I'd like to get to doing that's a pretty big thing, but we should be able to do effectively, but requires someone to kind of own it, is running our conformance tests on providers either like nightly or weekly, whatever cadence we find is appropriate, so that we don't get to the end of a release cycle for a provider. And, this time for our first conformance testing, we realized we had, a bunch of examples that didn't work properly and that sort of thing. We should be testing that more frequently. So that would be top priority in my mind in this effort.
Nice. Yeah. And I think that effort to get the conformance tests up and running, and then results of those conformance tests against all the major providers was definitely a worthwhile effort. They uncovered some things, got some of the documentation up to date, fixed some of the patterns to be, more compliant with what we expect a Crossplane provider to be behaving as. And so, yeah, I agree with that does seem that an effort around integration testing on a regular cadence would be much more possible now that all of that is, that how kind of house cleaning has been done there. So I do like that idea a lot. If we want to open more specific issues for that sounds reasonable to me as well too. I do like a lot that we got the core composition sort of integration foundation in from 1.3, which was nice. So yeah, if we want to clean this up and kind of track provider specific conformance regular testing, that sounds pretty reasonable. And then I think maybe one of the major things that we want to be investigating or maybe putting some effort into for 1.4 as well too would be the concept of revisions for composition, so that you'd be basically able to update compositions over time and roll them back if a new version isn't good. So being able to iterate over compositions, and have the version control and things like that is a demanded feature as well too, that kind of helps take the foundation of composition and have it be applicable in more real world scenarios as well too, of more of a life cycle of them as well too. I think we can take a look at the doc here for some of the stuff that folks writing. Josh, I think let's go in order. Sorry. Performance improvements. Dan, do you want to talk about that one? We'll go in order here for stuff that people added to the agenda.
Yeah, sure. So these are two different issues. One of them is pretty much already ratified and is in process of implementation, and that's exposing the pole interval, or the drift detection interval, you might say, for all providers, which basically means that, when your provider is running, you can say, I want you to check for drift every 10 minutes, every 30 seconds, every 2 days, whatever you want. And so that's already been implemented in provider AWS, hasn't been released yet, but that's going into the other providers as well. So this should help with some of the things that folks have been running into with long reconcile times where we've hit back off, basically, just reducing the number of reconciles that are attributing back off to the aggregate rate limiter, which is, basically controlling how often you hit the external API from all controllers. The other one, which is the one Jared has up here, is one I opened the other day, and it was actually the one you had up right there. It is a bit bigger of a thing and would require some design and that sort of thing. But the idea here is both around performance and some authentication components. And this would basically allow you to have multiple instances of a provider running at a time. And what we would basically do there is use a predicate on all of the controllers that say only reconcile manage resources that reference this provider config, which would essentially allow you to partition based on the provider config, which could be useful for both. The provider config is a nice isolation boundary because you could use the same account for two different provider configs. Every managed resource has to reference one, so you could create kind of an arbitrary number of them. And the idea is this would work sort of how the composition engine works. When you create an XRD, it spins up controllers for those types and watches for instances of them. So what we would do here is it would watch for provider config. A provider would declare the type of its provider config. It would then watch for provider configs and then start up kind of a controller to create a deployment for each of them. And it would require providers, allowing you to set which provider config they're watching, and would also be opt-in, of course. So anyway, I think this could be useful to the community, but like I said, this was just kind of my musings. But it's something I think would be useful to pursue in the near term.
What it makes me think of, some of the stuff you mentioned there, you might consider this too, is if you have a need to restrict which resource types the person is allowed to use. Sounds like I might be able to use something like this for that too. Like if I only want RDS and S3 from AWS.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that came up in one of the responses to this is the ability to basically only have a provider reconciling, a certain, or just RDS instances for a certain provider config or something like that. Our providers are not currently architected super well to do that. That being said, there's not like a ton of overhead from what I can tell of them watching arbitrary resources. Typically, we control who can create what via composition, but that's definitely something to take into consideration with this design here.
Dan, so did you, so of these two issues here, did you want this one like in the 1.4 project then?
Yeah, you could drop that in progress.
Okay. Do that now. All right. And then the other one is, I think it's already in 1.4 in the proposed column. Is that sufficient for now?
Yeah, I think we'd have to have more discussion before committing to it.
Awesome. Okay, and then so going down the list here further for asks from the community here. Josh, I think you added these to the agenda, is that right?
Yeah, I just added them now. I figured I'd bring them up. It's kind of telling you about our scenario at Discover. So we've decided that we want to use things from all clouds, relatively generically. And so my main use case for Crossplane is to provide databases or buckets or whatever from several clouds in a relatively generic way. And I was pretty surprised, I've been working on this for the past week or so, not to find many good examples. I feel like that I see a lot of compositions used to just provision, let's say, a collection of provider resources underneath, like say an Azure resource group and a storage account in a container, or like a IAM user in a bucket. I didn't really find much that said, here, if I specify AWS, send me here, GCP here. I mean, ultimately, we're going to want to push that even further in the platform. If we find that you're running, in Kubernetes somewhere in GCP, we're going to choose this one. But I didn't find that many examples, and was a pretty tricky thing to figure out. So that's what I just wanted to suggest. I mean, it's not an issue in the core, but maybe a few more examples for people with scenarios like ours for multi-cloud.
Hey, Josh, did you?
Go ahead.
Oh, hey, Nick, welcome back, buddy. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, I was just, your wording there sounded like you did actually figure out some of it in the end. So I totally agree that we should have more examples, and I think it's something that we have on someone's roadmap, maybe Steven's, not sure, at some point.
Yep.
But if you have something that could be easily translated into an example, if you wanted to like throw those into an issue or something, or just whatever, you know, ideally, if you wanted to like open a PR against the docs to add examples, that would be the best. But you know, if there's anything lighter weight, like just dropping what you did in an issue or something like that we could start from, that would help a lot.
Yeah, I dropped something in there, but I'll see if I can. That's where I'm working on some stuff now. So I've got like an XRD that's right now just AWS, and it's also, I'm working on the Azure in the background. But yeah, sure.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, maybe the GitHub discussions feature we have turned on could also be a good place to align on this kind of stuff, since we, you know, want to come up with something that works for a bunch of people.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like an engineering issue, but I just wanted to bring it up. The second one is also, this comes from our requirements. We have to publish, they don't like Kubernetes secrets. We have to publish stuff into Vault. In fact, our operators, so I'm hoping Crossplane will replace some of our bespoke operators. They configure a secrets engine in Vault, which is kind of questionable, I think, but they go that far. So that, I mean, we won't be, I wouldn't be able to adopt it if I couldn't publish somewhere else. So I know it's an issue, and I think it came up in the Slack yesterday, but I just wanted to say that that's important to us.
Yeah, I put you on there with that issue, Nick, because I believe you had opened it, and I thought it had been one that you had maybe talked about working on, but I didn't know if you had any comments on it.
Nothing much. I'm having some slight technical difficulties with my input devices today, so it's slow pulling up documents, but nothing that's not written in the issue already. I do think it's a good idea to do. The challenging thing about it is that it is almost, I mean, the issue as it's proposed today is a breaking change to every managed resource API. So so there's an interesting sort of decision to be made there about whether we want to do that, or whether we want to try and do it as a backward compatible way, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of just stuck on design and having the time to work through that design.
That's fair. Yeah, I'm trying to make the case here at Discover, but we've worked on some of this integration. Maybe we could even contribute. I'm trying to push for that. We'll see.
Yeah, thank you. That would definitely be appreciated. My hunch is that if you'll have got operators that write to Vault, you probably have some good expertise that you could share there. My hunch is that the engineering here is going to be relatively straightforward once we just figure out what we want to do with our APIs. We kind of, the background context here is that we're building up a small amount of changes that would be breaking changes to the managed resource schema in general. So there's a decision to be made about whether we stick with calling them V1 Beta 1 and just sort of bolt on in a suboptimal way support for Vault, or whether we sort of refactor the API to have what we would consider to be better support for Vault, and perhaps lump in some other breaking changes and then call that V1 or something like that, so that we can actually, you know, make a cut.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, great ideas, Josh. And then I don't know if you noticed it too while we're talking about the second issue there. Well, we added a couple links for your first issue around examples. One of them is like the show and tell section of the GitHub discussions on the main Crossplane repo. That's where some people have been posting some examples. I don't know how discoverable it is yet, but it is kind of a nice area where some of those examples from the community are being collected. And then also we had a reference platform for multi-cloud Kubernetes, which does show kind of a higher level abstraction for a Kubernetes cluster, and then how different cloud implementations of compositions underneath it could be implemented to that same genericized abstraction of a cluster at the top level. So I don't know if you had already seen that one, but that may be a useful reference for you as well, perhaps. It does not do buckets and containers, et cetera, but it may some patterns in there may be useful.
I found that, and it is a really good start. Maybe expanding that to more of the typical components in a control plane, like
yeah, that could be a good place for more examples there for other infrastructure platform components, stuff like that. Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Yeah, great discussion here. Anything else on the 1.4 board timeline, issues that folks are concerned about or they're working on as well too? A lot of contributors on the call here that people want to bring up for 1.4 discussion.
There's a few issues, particularly the ones around using self-signed certificates for pulling images from a registry, as well as providing package pull secrets that came up as something we'd seen kind of abstractly folks wanting. But I'd love to, if anyone has that as a real use case, I'd love to get some feedback on that. The technical implementation is pretty straightforward, but I just want to make sure that, you know, for folks that are going to be consuming it, that we're accomplishing what we need there. So if you have interest in that, that sounds like something that would be useful within your organization or even required potentially, feel free to comment on those issues, and we can also set up a call or something if it needs to be more in depth than that.
Cool, Dan, thank you for that note. Awesome. So yeah, the floor is always open here and in Slack as well too, to kind of for folks to weigh in on issues that are important to them. Feel free to always open an issue if you don't have one for a feature or a scenario that you would like to see covered. Always happy to have issues opened, and then always happy to have people comment on other ones that exist, or add reactions like upvotes and stuff like that. We always continue that discussion outside of this community meeting as well too. I did add a new section here for this time in this community meeting because most of the time we're kind of talking a lot about core Crossplane and the release schedule for that. Providers they have their own release cadence. They're kind of released more on an on-demand fashion, but they can be released at any time as well too when there's something substantial to put out. So if folks wanted to add links to some things that they thought were important for the providers as well too, then they're more than welcome to add those here to the agenda doc also. One thing that I've been hearing, I think maybe from 4 different people recently in the past couple of weeks, was around support for AKS clusters to have the Microsoft calls them agent pools and node pools interchangeably, it sounds like, and different documentation calls them different things. But basically having node pools for AKS clusters, I've heard that maybe four times recently now. So that seems to be kind of a hot issue that continues to folks be requesting. If there's anything else on other people's minds that they want to bring up here, then the floor is open for that too. Well, we can always have those discussions on GitHub in Slack as well too. Okay. So I think we can keep on moving here to the community topics section. So upcoming live streams and talks and programs, etc. I was just quickly adding a link to this beforehand. I think there's actually a lot more like upcoming talks and presentations and streams and stuff like that that we can continue adding to the list here. Feel free for anybody to drop a link there. But one at the upcoming community, the Kubernetes Community Day is going to be a talk on how to provision infrastructure with Crossplane. There's a link to it in the Twitter link there where it's announcing it and kind of having a link to it. And then there's also an upcoming stream tomorrow that I think Victor and Dan as well are both getting involved in. Do you guys want to talk about that for a quick second?
Cool, yeah, so okay, go ahead, you go then. No, you're first.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, well, everyone welcome Victor. Victor just joined our team at Upbound and is here to do a much better job of developer advocacy than I have attempted to do in some respects in the community. So y'all are about to get a big upgrade there. But with Victor coming in and kind of onboarding, we thought, as we like to be transparent and open source, that we'd live stream kind of some of the onboarding there and using Upbound Cloud. So we're just going to walk through some stuff. It'll be informal, but I know Victor's already got a better stream set up than I do. So I'm excited to see that, and also excited to see the awesome new content he makes.
Now I'm blushing. Thank you.
Yeah, that will definitely be a cool stream. I'm excited to see that as well too. Yep. and anybody else can drop a link in there for upcoming talks and streams and stuff as well too. I think, and we're always happy to retweet them from the Crossplane account as well too for more visibility. Sweet. Okay. So not too much to update everybody on with the incubation proposal. All the interviews are done. Thanks for everybody who participated in those again. And then the TOC, the Technical Oversight Committee, is about to take the steps to open the public comment period. I don't have a ton of transparency into when that will happen, but there isn't anything on our side still before that happens. So all the relevant links for the proposal are there in the agenda document here. And when they do open the public comment period, we will be asking folks and poking folks to go ahead and add some support to it there. So that next step will let folks know when that does happen. No negative feedback or anything that hasn't been dealt with already. So I believe this is still on track and looking solid from everything that's within our control here. And then conformance certification, I don't think there's an update on this one as well either. Once we got it up to date, we got it off the ground, and a bunch of pull requests are open from folks out in the community there, from AWS and from Equinix and IBM Cloud. So we got a bunch of those initial conformance results are open for multiple providers now. And then, that program is still not been, voted on and ratified by the CNCF. So we've got everything in place there as well too. And we're hoping that with incubation, that when that makes the final progress and conclusion, that the conformance program will be able to move forward as well too. But thanks to everybody doing the effort to get that off the ground and get the results run for all the providers as well too. It's been really nice to have that. Okay, it doesn't look like we had any other PRs to bring up. Are there any topics that folks wanted to bring up that did not make it into the agenda documents? All right, if there's not any other items for folks to bring up here, then tune in tomorrow for Victor's first day onboarding stream and ride along for some of the lessons that he's going to share with us there. That'll be really cool. And then otherwise we can adjourn here and talk on Slack. All right, thanks everybody.
Nice to meet you all.
Yeah, thanks for joining, Josh.